One of the great joys of being a motoring journalist is that you get to go places where, well, if you were a member of the public, you just wouldn't get to go. For instance, here we are at the Audi Tradition Museum in Ingolstadt. This isn't normally open to the public. We're allowed here today to look at these wonderful cars. But looking is all well and good. Imagine what it would be like to drive something like this on the open road. If only. A 1939 Audi 920 convertible. It must have been at the time the bee's knees. A six-cylinder engine, 2.5 litres, producing about 70 brake horsepower, would get you to a top speed of around about 70 miles an hour. Now, these cars were produced between 1938 and 1940. Of course, the war would have affected production greatly, and they really are quite fun to drive. It gets a bit of getting used to. The brakes are very, very sharp. There's hardly any room for your foot on the accelerator pedal, especially if you're wearing rather big shoes like I am today. But once you sort of get used to it and come to a stop, it's all right. It really is such an amazing car to drive, and these days with having such good brakes on cars, you don't need to think ahead and plan ahead quite as much. Of course, you should keep an eye on what's ahead on the road in front of you, but in something like this you really do have to think far, far ahead about how you're actually going to stop, because the brakes take some real getting used to. You put your foot down and nothing much happens from about 30 miles an hour. So beware seems to be the key thing to say about driving a car like this. Well, what a positively amazing car. It's been a fascinating trip to Ingolstadt here to celebrate 100 years of Audi tradition. It's quite amazing to drive a car like this, which is, after all, 60 years old. And it makes you think that the Audi tradition is something very special. At the time, just before the outbreak of the Second World War, this must have been the absolute bee's knees in automobiles. But of course, without Audi's tradition, cars like that and all the other great cars that we've seen wouldn't have been produced. And cars like this, the stunning TT, also wouldn't have been produced. That car is, well, it's rather difficult to drive for somebody who's not used to the lack of power steering and lack of power brakes and things like this. This car makes you incredibly lazy, but I'm driving home in this all the same.